12, the one therefore under which the most perfected type of spiritual man can be born. This sign is called Pisces and lasts from February 21 to March 21. Its symbol is the fish, which is also the symbol of Christianity. The lesson of Pisces is a final letting go of the self, the complete merging into the lives and feelings of others. Therefore 81 the finding of the third eye under this sign are born our most brilliant actors. The inspiration which the people of Pisces have earned produces also fine poets, dramatists, and musicians. The strongest and the weakest types are born at this time. The force which flows through the Piscean is difficult to handle, and unless he turns it to good account it may drive him to drugs, drink and other excesses. The sign is a dual one, so the two ways are open. The native may rise, if inspired, to any heights of self-denial and attainment, but he needs encouragement and confidence in himself. As with all the later signs, his character is complex and versatile. His past training gives him a natural understanding, he absorbs knowledge rather than studies it. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, who bestows brilliance and a love of ceremony, as we saw in Sagittarius. So our Piscean contributes much to the decorative and romantic in life, and this arouses intense and sometimes fanatical devotion in his friends. If these friends push him in the right way he can become a great public servant, but he depends upon cooperation with others, he prefers to work in brotherhood. He has identified himself with the universe, and this gives him a great love of travel and the sea. From the advanced types in this sign we can choose Chopin, Michelangelo, David Livingstone, David Garrick and Ibsen. We have now completed our initial review of the types born under the 12 signs. We must, however, remember that astrology subdivides them ad infinitum, and that the laws of rebirth, karma, and free will arrange for numberless variations of the order in which people progress through these signs. The number of times they have accomplished the full round will determine whether they are old and experienced souls or new souls. The old souls are of course becoming more rounded out as they approach the state of perfect man, who is a blend of the best in all the signs. The examples which we have given of famous people are therefore the older souls, and not really very typical of their sign, but the mediocre and simple types rarely leave their mark in history. 82 How we are classified with regard to the 12 cell salts which are the principal agents of activity in the human body. Let us note the interesting relation they are said to bear to the signs of the zodiac. Aries, the ram, the brain worker, uses up very much of the potassium phosphate which nourishes the brain fluid and produces the highest rate of vibration in the body. A deficiency causes brain fog and lack of comprehension. Taurus, the bull, ruling the liver, governs the cell salt sulfate of sodium, which eliminates excess water from the body, due to the abundant intake of the luxury-loving Taurian. A deficiency of this salt causes such ills as diabetes and quinsy. Gemini, the twins, ruling the nervous system, governs that cell salt potassium chloride, which forms fibrin in the blood and so builds the nerves, while a deficiency causes thickening of the fibrin, and therefore bronchitis, asthma, and other nervous diseases result. Cancer, the tenacious crab, rules the spleen, and governs the salt fluoride of lime, which builds the tenacious elastic fibers holding the body together. A deficiency of this causes sagging throughout the organs, with many attendant ills, from depression to dropsy. Leo, the sun, ruler of the heart and vitality, governs the salt phosphate of magnesia, which regulates the muscular spasms such as those controlling the heartbeats. A deficiency causes cramps, lack of muscular force, palpitations, and meningitis. Virgo, ruler of the solar plexus and stomach, governs the salt potassium sulfate, which makes the oil necessary to keep the machinery going throughout the body. A deficiency causes thickening of the oil, which clogs the pores and produces various forms of stagnation. Libra, the balance, ruler of the kidneys, governs the cell salt carbonate of sodium. This salt holds the balance between the acids and the fluids in the system, and produces harmonious life. A deficiency engenders acidity, with hate, jealousy, depression, and their attendant ailments, such as headache and lumbago. Scorpio, the scorpion, ruler of the sex organs, governs the cell salt sulfate of lime. This needs to be transmuted by water to form 83, the finding of the third eye, the white plaster of Paris. This strengthens the whole system and gives tone to the gray matter of the brain. A deficiency demoralizes the brain, destroying the power of elevated thought, and renders the body prone to infectious diseases. Sagittarius, the archer, rules the thighs, and governs the cell salt silica, which is really quartz. This is formed of strong minutes arrow-shaped pieces, which stiffen the walls of hair, nails, nerve sheaths and cells, and pierce a way outwards to the surface for necessary eruptions. A deficiency produces weakness of the cell walls, leading to various forms of self-poisoning such as rheumatism and other inflammations. Capricorn, the goat, rules the bones, and governs the cell salt calcium phosphate. This uses albumin to make cement for bones. A deficiency causes diseases due to overflow of albumin, which upsets the gastric juices and brings on such inflict ions as Bright's disease and other digestive troubles. Aquarius, the water carrier, rules the white corpus cleese, and governs the cell salt sodium chloride, which acts as water carrier to the human system. A deficiency causes general frailty and such diseases as jaundice. Pisces, the fish, rules the feet, the foundation of the body, and the red corpus cleese, and governs the cell salt phosphate of iron, which is the foundation of the blood. A deficiency gives bad circulation, chills and fevers. Here, then, we have a rough idea as to how the planetary rays are said to affect the chemicals within us and our own reactions. Much research work along these lines by certain of the biochemists and other scientists is in progress at present. Naturally, the reactions of the cell salts overlap and interplay with great complexity, and the science would appear to be a deep one. How much truth there is in all this, and how much study it would take to produce useful results, are questions which we must leave to the student who feels disposed to investigate. We cannot leave the science of astrology without applying the micro-macrocosmic law to it, and observing how it works out on 84, how we are classified larger scale. According to its findings, then, our own sun with its planets is in its turn revolving round a parent sun. The signs of the zodiac repeat themselves in a still greater cycle, during which our sun takes about 2,500 years to pass through each sign, but as this greater movement is in the opposite direction from the smaller one, the signs follow one another in reverse order. Each of these great periods is called an age. During 2,000 years of the Jewish dispensation, the sun was passing through Aries, the ram, which animal figures very largely in sacrifice and symbol of the time. Before that period there was the age of Taurus, wherein the winged bull, representing the Taurian capacity for rising to spiritual heights, was worshipped and sculptured by such people as the Chaldeans and Assyrians. The Sphinx would appear, in this light, to have been built during the age of Leo, somewhere before 10,000 BC, as it has a lion's body. Following the Jewish came the Christian dispensation, under the sign of Pisces, the fish. The fish is the symbol of Christianity, and some of us are required to eat it every Friday. The 2,000 years of the Piscean age drew to a close with the 19th century, and we are now coming gradually into the new age. This is the Aquarian age, when the waters of life will be poured out to all mankind. During this period we are told that universal brotherhood will become an accomplished fact and a golden age will be brought to birth. According to these calculations, then, it must be about 34,000 years since the previous Aquarian period, containing also a golden age. Historians who study this particular question proclaim that this took place on the lost continent of Atlantis, whose submergence caused the spread of its culture to other lands. There have been several hundred books written on Atlantis, many founded on geological and biological research. The subject is one which is apt to stir racial memory and enlarge man's viewpoint. It enables him to understand the inevitable succession of cycles and therefore to prepare hopefully at this time for the golden age which is promised to us soon by the shorthand in the skies. 85 6 male and female underscore 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 underscore. Let us see what part the much tormented question of sex plays in this deeper conception of life that we are trying to reach. We must follow our usual procedure and first try to get at the roots and underlying causes, taking as broad and as scientific a view of the subject as we can. We find the male and female are really the positive and negative aspects in nature, that is to say, that male is the positive or electrical quality and female is the magnetic, receptive, or negative quality. When the two fuse, creative action occurs. The word negative is here used in its electrical application, and means that which does not act but holds power. It does not represent futility or weakness, but reserve force. The whole of the universe is built upon this fusion of male and female. From the greatest planet to the tiniest chemical cell the same process goes on. It is really as if the world were an electric pole containing vast numbers of other electric poles of all sizes down to the most minute. Let us consider this question of electricity for a moment. Quite simply, you have a current of electricity passing down a pole or straight line. The pole can be a bar or iron, a planet, or a person. One side of the pole is the positive or electrical side, and the other side is the negative or magnetic side. The magnetic side draws to itself, absorbs and retains power. When it contacts the positive, i.e. the action, or electrical, side of the pole, it gives off this power, combustion occurs, a spark is lit, and force is generated. It is exactly this process which causes a planet to rotate, moves a car, creates a child, or makes a plant grow. 86 male and female. The positive electrical male side of nature is represented by the acids, and the passive female magnetic side of nature is represented by the alkalis. Before a planet or a car moves, the right constituents of acid and alkali must be assembled, to create the little explosions of electrical life force which brings action about. It is also this identical driving force which motivates our bodies. The tiniest cell in our bodies is an electric battery in a state of combustion, just as our whole body is also electrically polarized. The acid part of our bodies is the action part, the muscles. The alkali part of us is the blood, which holds and carries the power to those muscles. When in a state of health the two are rightly balanced, but at death the power which holds them apart, the pole, is withdrawn and the acid floods the alkaline blood, causing the whole mechanism to become static. In chemistry you must take an alkali element and combine it with an acid element if you want to create a compound which is strong and useful. If you want to make a bomb, which is only condensing the production of force into a small space, you must also bring together an acid and an alkali. When they are allowed to meet, the bomb explodes. The same thing happens when a well-matched man and woman meet. Attraction leads to combination and then action. It must not be inferred, however, that a man is all electrical and a woman all magnetic. On the contrary, these two qualities run in juxtaposition through every cell and atom. But all existing things are preeminently of one sex, although containing both interiorly in various degrees. The planet Mars, for instance, is preeminently masculine, but of course is held in manifestation by its pole of positive and negative. Our Earth has its pole running through it, called north and south at its two ends, and, of course, one side of the Earth is electrical and the other magnetic. So also a man and a woman, though preeminently male electric and female magnetic, have each what we might call their poles running through them. The right side of our bodies is electric and 87 the finding of the third eye, the left side magnetic, the right side the side of action and the left the female or heart side. The subdivision of these two continues to infinity in our bodies, until each tiny cell has its pole, and even each atom, as we know, is revolving round its pole or axis. Thus throughout the whole of life from the greatest to the tiniest we have the same process going on. The female magnetic power attracts the male electric force and creation and action takes place. Now, as this process runs throughout everything we may expect to find an expression of it in our own brain, and we do. The human brain has a shape curiously like the human embryo, and it contains a part which is male and a part which is female. When these two parts are coordinated by mental training and concentration, and made to cooperate, a most wonderful development takes place, and the mind becomes inspired, forceful and creative. This was well known to the very ancient peoples. In their own remarkable way they worshipped the means by which a human being can contact God within his own brain. They worshipped those symbols of the male-female power in the head. Succeeding generations, in their ignorance, debased this worship into the phallic worship of sex in its physical sense. Our ideas about the things that matter have grown smaller and smaller down the centuries, until at present they are almost non-existent. We can now begin to glimpse the truths lying behind the worship, in many ancient civilizations, of the great trinities of life. The Christians adopted them, and gave us God, the life force, the Virgin, or Mother, the wisdom or stored power, and the Son, the result of that blending, the one who acts and achieves. In most ancient religions we can trace an appreciation of this trinity. The alchemists expressed the triangle in their own way, as mercury, sulfur, and salt, our cell salts being that which builds and acts within our one bodies. Then there is also our sun, the male electrical positive force whose rays strike the magnetic female moon. The combination of 88 male and female both rays reaching the earth causes fertilization, movement, and growth. For a long time we have been accustomed in our little limited way to think of sex only in the primitive terms of our power of physical procreation, not as the base process on which the whole universe is built. Infinitely petty and restricting taboos have shamefacedly locked up the entire question in a secret box in our minds. We muddle along in complete ignorance, oblivious that the box contains our greatest jewels. Let us now take out these jewels of ours and study their value. We are confronted throughout history with certain symbols. One of them is the serpent, which was always much in evidence wherever the ancient temples devoted to wisdom flourished. Since the old story of Adam and Eve, the serpent has represented two things, knowledge and sex, thus hinting at a close connection between them. And the secret is that the creative force within us is one single force, whether it be used for physical or mental ends. We have the choice as to which way we shall direct this force, upwards or downwards. In material-minded or primitive man it continues to be used purely for procreation or sensual gratification. But as man aspires to higher ideals, as he yearns to create mentally and live in the spirit, the force is gradually drawn upwards to the creative principles in the brain. This force is called by the Easterns the Kundalini, and is likened to a serpent of fire lying coiled at the base of the spine. If man steadily purifies his mind and nature through living chastely and moderately, he is able to magnetize the Kundalini serpent upwards through the channel of his spine, until finally it reaches the masculine-feminine principles of the brain and fires them into coordination. The man is then filled with inspiration and becomes attuned to the inner world of wisdom. This can only be accomplished with the help of the Kundalini serpent. Perhaps Christ gave a hint of this when he said, "Be ye wise as serpents." 89 The finding of the third eye. Men and women have, therefore, the choice as to what they will do with this power within them. Shall they exhaust it in the various self-indulgences of sex life, both mental and physical, or shall they use it to become creative in the realms of the spirit and higher mind, a force for good? It is this tremendous choice which every human being has to face. Usually they face it unconsciously or in the dark, because of the utter helplessness of present-day education in these matters. Hardly one of the many pitfalls surrounding them is properly explained. It is easy to convince ourselves of the fact that it is one and the same force which feeds either the procreative organs or the brain. The gland specialists have brought much to light proving this. They tell us that the pineal gland in the head acts as a brake upon sex development. As we have said, it was once a third eye. Now it regulates the action of light upon the body. If it is diseased or inactive, we get precocious sex development. The pituitary body, in the head, is the gland of intellectuality, promoting the mathematical and artistic powers. When it is deficient, sexual abnormalities result. We also have the evidence of our numberless lunatic asylums, peopled largely with those whose brains have deteriorated through sex excesses of various kinds. On the other hand, we have many cases of people who apparently have gone mad as the result of fanatical piousness. This needs another explanation. Here we have come up against the result of what might be termed spiritual greed. A person who is greedy and self-indulgent on the physical plane will naturally not change his character just because he decides that more benefit will accrue from a pursuit of spiritual assets. It is possible to be greedy for spiritual food which is as yet undeserved. Very often people attempt to make in a few years the spiritual progress for which they should have been patiently working for all their lives. The result is that the body has not had time for its vibrations to become purified and raised to a higher tempo, and the brain is still full of the dregs of worldly and impure thoughts. When, therefore, by a forcing process, the Kundalini serpent of fire is prematurely driven up the spine, 90 male and female burning away all dross as it goes, and it arrives within a brain unfit to receive it, parts of the brain cannot stand this bath of fire and perish with the sudden burning of the dross they still contain, and various forms of derangement ensue. Many highly dangerous breathing exercises originating in the East are designed with purpose of arousing the Kundalini. They bring disastrous results when used by ignorant or materially minded people. Sometimes the same issue is achieved when those with mixed motives fling themselves violently into the various religious cults and isms. We hear that their final fold turns out to be a mental home. Yet another mishap can befall the aspirant who is not sufficiently wholehearted. If he once arouses the serpent, and then subconsciously repents of his endeavors, the serpent rushes downwards and plunges his owner into the worst of orgies and excesses. Unfortunately, this sometimes happens to saintly men who have been just a little too ambitious for spiritual gain. We have to realize that steady, patient, even and balanced progress is the surest way. We must not expect to come to results too easily. Greed of the mental or spiritual body will produce a congestion and sickness on those planes as surely as its counterpart will be on the physical. To try and attain mental expansion while still the victim of inhibitions and repressions is like expecting to become a ballet dancer while still refusing to use certain limbs or muscles. We have so fully to realize the glories of possible attainment that all lesser desires simply fade out. They do not have to be repressed. It is only in the purity of a one-pointed mind, the root meaning of pure is complete, that we can welcome as one of the greatest events of our life the safe awakening of the Kundalini serpent. The same truth applies in the relation between the sexes, where again sincerity of purpose and wholeheartedness are the determining factors of resulting happiness. When a spiritually minded man and woman fall in love with each other, there occurs a blending and a union between the sevenfold bodies of each of them, culminating in spiritual as well as physical creation. This gives an ecstasy and fulfillment 7 times greater than that which the average physical 91, the finding of the third eye union, can bring. Force and power are engendered 100-fold more on all planes through having been conserved instead of frittered away. Both the children and all creative work resulting from such a union would be incomparably superior to the average. If every child were brought up with understanding and ambition focused upon such an ideal, we should soon have a heaven upon earth. As it is, the subject of sex is so little understood that any irregularities in its manifestation consign the victim to suffering in ignorant and misunderstood wretchedness. The interplay of the masculine-feminine positive-negative principle throughout bodies is not yet fully grasped. The ancient wisdom teaches that man, having a positive masculine physical body, has a feminine negative etheric body. This may be why he has in some ways much less staying power in the matter of pain and endurance than woman, who owes her endurance to the fact that in spite of her negative feminine physical body she has a positive or male etheric body. Man's astral or emotional body is masculine, and therefore active and under his control, whereas woman's astral is negative and absorbing. It is at the mercy of outside influences, and that is why she can be dragged down to lower depths in some ways than a man can. A drunken woman is more terrible than a drunken man. It would seem to follow, then, that man's mental body has a preponderance of the feminine quality and woman's of the masculine, and perhaps that explains why wise men have always considered that woman can actually take the lead and inspire them from the mental level if she but realizes it and fits herself to do so. Man is meant to learn sensitivity and intuition from woman, and woman is meant to learn steadiness and honesty from man. A perfect man or a perfect woman must be a complete blending of the qualities of both. That is why we are told that at the end of evolution there will be no differentiation of the sexes. Meanwhile, the process of this integration brings about temporary aberrations which result, through misunderstanding, in homosexuality and other irregularities. 92 Male and female. We are taught that men and women change their sex at various incarnations. This change sometimes produces a masculine woman or a feminine man, until the readjustment is complete. It is necessary that these things are better understood. Then people, instead of giving way helplessly to any abnormalities which they discover within themselves, and living a life of shamefaced yet defiant indulgence, will learn to master such tendencies and turn them to good account. When we consider that, from the greatest to the smallest, all progress and evolution depends upon the interplay of the male positive and female negative principle, and how this especially applies to the mental and spiritual creative powers to which mankind is dedicated to strive, we begin to see how much futile stagnation is caused either by people who refuse any relationship with the opposite sex, such as nuns and monks, or by those who indulge in homosexuality. The 7 bodies of man and woman merge creatively when they work or play together, entirely irrespective of the sexual act, and stimulate and nourish one another in a way which is essential to the bringing through of creative inspiration. In the temples of ancient wisdom, before their degeneration, the priests worked with their female oracles to achieve their greatest results. When men and women are brought up to be sensitively alive to this interplay of the forces between them, they will obtain so much fulfillment from them that the act of procreation will fall back quite naturally to its normal use. Sex antagonism and other inhibitions will disappear. There will be produced the perfect working unit, built up of woman wisdom, strength and manpower action. It is upon such units that the golden age will be founded. 93 7 Birth, sleep and death underscore 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 underscore. As we have proceeded to explore life along these lines, it has appeared to grow more and more complicated. Indeed, many people will draw back with a feeling of resentment. They will say, "It is not necessary to know all these things. So far I have managed very well without them. The simple Christian faith is sufficient for me." Such people will probably hate the idea of living again on this earth. They are interested neither in the future development of mankind nor in the service which they might contribute to it. In this way they show us that they are possibly still the victims of moral laziness. They are not yet prepared to think deeply or to seek new ways of helping and achieving. They wish to be left in peace in the groove in which they have been brought up. Nor is it good to endeavor to persuade them otherwise. They are probably doing very well at their present stage, even, possibly, better than those who are so anxious to teach them other ways. There are plenty who are eager for further knowledge and who need no persuading. Let us continue our explorations with these latter ones, and consider more deeply the phenomena of man's existence, his birth, his growth, his sleep, and finally his death. It has been said that man is born unfinished. He is born at the 9th month, the finished number being 12. and certain it is that the young of the human are the most helpless of all. Throughout this chapter we will study the human being in his fullest sense, that is to say with his 7 interpenetrating bodies as before explained. 94 Birth, sleep and death. We are told that the birth of the physical body precedes that of the other bodies, each one of which is intimately connected with one of the 7 principal endocrine glands. We can do no more than touch on this intricate subject here, in order to give point to our argument. Up to the age of 7 the average child has only complete control of its physical body, the rest of its faculties being imitative or dormant. In a court of law a child is not considered punishable until after 7 years of age. After the first cycle of 7 years we are told that the etheric body is born, or comes under positive control. The ethers govern growth and memory. These are the 2 functions most prominently active during the next 7 years. At the age of 14 the astral or emotional body is said to come into birth. This governs the emotions and desires, so this is the age of puberty, and unrestrained emotions. Up to 14 years the child has been dominated by the thymus gland, in which was bequeathed a store of red blood corpuscles by the mother. This gland should become recessional by the age of puberty, at which time the child has begun to manufacture its own blood. The blood is known to be the seat of the ego, which can then begin to control the young person, who becomes conscious at this time of his individuality. From now on guidance instead of authority must be the rule. The adrenal glands, which come into dominance at puberty, help to develop the individual driving force as well as the brain power. They are said to be the glands of fight and fright. Under their government there is extreme sensitivity to fear and anxiety. These tendencies arouse a need for some kind of religious belief to give reassurance. So we find that during these years there is often great emotional piety. The end of the 3rd cycle of 7 years sees the birth of the mental body, so that by 21 years of age the individual has reached an important epoch in his life. He has accomplished the completion of the 3 lower bodies of man, the physical, emotional and mental. He has developed into the complete human being, from ordinary standpoints, and is considered to have reached 95, the finding of the 3rd eye, his majority and the state of manhood. From then onwards, if man develops as he could and should do, every further 7 years will see the birth of a new quality or power, of a kind more subtle and less easily described here. Finally, we come to the magic number of 7 times 7 and man has reached the age of 49. It is here, therefore, that we can expect the flowering of his greatest power and quality. Sure enough we are told that it is at this age that his higher mind should come into birth, giving him a subtle capacity for the highest and loftiest achievement. The pituitary body and pineal gland should now cooperate to use the sum of his life's experience for new creative ideas, deductions, and philosophies. Therefore, at this age, it would indeed be well if man could retire from all mechanical routine work and concentrate on giving to the world his contribution in the way of schemes for the betterment of mankind and the various inspirations resulting from his experience. As he could still have expectation of life for another 50 years, this would allow him close on half a century of potent fulfillment in living. Such would be the program of the perfected man or woman who was able to live up to his or her potentialities. But at the present time many people dissipate their energy and strength to such an extent while young that they never reach the flowering of their greatest faculties at all. They live and die without ever tasting the ultimate joys and triumphs of human existence. They are never able to feel that they have made any knowledge really their own, that they know any one fundamental fact of life, what they are, why they are here, or to what progressing. They live always like the man who said, "The only certain thing in life is doubt." They admit their dark ignorance by scoffing at the bare possibility of such knowledge, refusing to see that right down the ages there has been a vast accumulation of circumstantial evidence compiled for their own heritage and benefit. They continue to muddle along interminably in their stagnant grooves. Such laziness makes man willing to be blind to the fact that his greatest contribution of value to the world can be expected after he 96 birth, sleep and death is 50. Therefore he does not husband his mental and his physical strength to that end. He should realize that the inspired productions of the higher mind give the intense joy of fulfillment, than which there is no greater glory. The fact that many people are half-exhausted wrecks by the age of 50, and others much before that, is a disgrace to progress and modern education, and one more proof of the prevailing ignorance is that people are not sensible of this disgrace. When healing the sick, Christ said, "Thy sin is forgiven thee," pointing out very definitely that disease is the outward manifestation of wrong thinking. But we have not yet taken the hint. We are still proud to tell of our disease, unaware that we are giving away the unclean and unkempt condition of our minds. In the future people will feel ashamed of letting down the community by becoming unwell. A man will be as unwilling to admit to having a cold as he now is to confess to a theft. The present general ill health is responsible for many irregularities in the development of the glands. Some of them do not recess when they should, and so a childish and unmoral state continues in the growing youth. Unbalance of the glands causes some of them to predominate too early, to compensate for weakness in others. This produces geniuses, who are, for that reason, often prone to epilepsy and other abnormalities. The ancients understood the connection between the glands and the subtle worlds of nature. It will be a happy day when that knowledge is revised by modern scientists. Let us next consider the common but marvelous phenomena of sleep. There is a vast accumulation of data proving that the ego or individual can and does leave the body during sleep. The blood recedes from the brain, which can then no longer function. Yet much mental activity may take place, together with many authentic experiences of faraway places. A person can, during sleep, solve intricate problems which have beaten him during the day. He can also 97 the finding of the third eye, tell the time and awaken at any hour decided upon. He can function in a complex world of happenings which he calls dreams. We are told that if the ego leaves the physical body during sleep, he does so clothed in his mental and astral bodies, in which he is as mobile as electricity. The physical body is left enveloped in its etheric body or kubal, that counterpart of the human being formed of condensed ethers, through which the life forces are fed to the tissues from the surrounding ethers. Man's various bodies are linked together by a vital elastic cord, operating rather like an electric current without the wire. This cord is a kind of umbilical cord which joins the ego and his vehicles to that part of Mother Earth which is his physical body. When it snaps, he is born into the afterlife, and we say that he is dead. This cord is referred to in the Bible as the silver cord. As long as it is intact, the traveling ego is able to get back into his body as surely as a telephone message can travel along the wire. We are told that the only difference between life and death is the sundering of this subtle link which binds a person to his physical body. A strong desire to see a friend may often take the sleeper to see that friend, who may be either awake in his physical body or himself traveling, while asleep, in the astral realms. In this way, it is said, many important meetings and actions are rehearsed by the people concerned days before they occur. This would explain why one often has the feeling of knowing just what is going to be said or done. It is possible in that way that many prophecies are given. In this connection we should notice the extreme significance which all ancient nations attached to dreams. The power clearly to remember one's dreams was cultivated assiduously by the priesthood, as was also the ability to interpret the dream. An adept in these matters was held in highest esteem by the nation, whose affairs were regulated according to the instructions or prophecies so given. Joseph of the Old Testament was such a case. Cheating or incompetence in these matters was a heinous crime. Josiah of the Bible was told that 98 birth, sleep and death false dreamers should be put to death. Alexander the Great spoke of dreams as the greatest chance man has of acquiring knowledge. Martin Luther said that the correct translation of "He giveth his beloved sleep" is "He giveth to his beloved during sleep." The whole history of the Bible, as well as many other ancient histories, revolves round the importance of visions, prophecies and dreams. What are we doing now about this interesting activity which takes up nearly a third of our living hours? The first step would be to obtain through concentration and practice a clearer recollection of our dreams. To do this it is necessary to try to visualize the astral plane as it really is. This is difficult because once we are free in the astral world conditions are utterly different. Then around us pulsates the living malleable astral stuff, which is free from the laws of gravitation, and which molds itself at once into form under the impetus of our minds. If we want a horse, for example, we involuntarily and rapidly build one with our thoughts, and it is only such a horse as our powers of visualization and observation can produce. So we are told that at night the astral realms are peopled with sleepers surrounded by their dreams or creations, which are sometimes ludicrous in the incompleteness of their conception. Apparently a person can, therefore, either actually meet his friend in sleep or converse with his own conception of his friend, which he has created. How near he gets to his desire depends on the extent of his concentration and willpower. Another condition of the astral world is that many things can be happening in the same spot without being aware of one another, as it were, the different grades or vibrations of astral stuff flowing through and interpenetrating without losing their separate identities, in much the same way as we when in physical bodies can walk right through in ghost. Here we enter the realm of the fourth dimension. If we have had no personal experience of it, we can only understand it by studying the thousands of descriptions given to us throughout history by those who had. 99. The finding of the third eye. The jar of returning from those subtler realms into the heavy vibrations of our physical bodies, at the moment of awakening, usually shatters the memory of our experience. We retain at best a jumbled and inconsequent translation of our dream. This is where the need of training comes in. We should concentrate on exercising a strong grip upon ourselves at the instant of awakening. By this simple expedient we may soon learn consciously to profit by our nightly experiences. Also, before sleeping we should tune our minds to our highest aspirations, as this will determine the realms we are able to reach. If the mind is clogged with petty earthly considerations, such as the price of food or a quarrel with a neighbor, its owner is naturally drawn to the same type of vibration when asleep in the astral world. Let us now consider what is said to happen when death has snapped the silver cord, and the person is finally separated from his physical body. We are told that often it may take a little while for the individual to realize that he is dead. but for some time prior to this he has been building in the astral stuff the kind of heaven or afterlife to which he aspires. Of course, thousands build a heaven with golden streets and angels playing on harps. These numberless living thought forms cohere by the law of attraction into one great whole, so that the conventional heaven is actually there awaiting its owners. Those who expect, because of their guilt, hellfire, and goblins, have created that charming reception for themselves also. The miser will probably have made for his use a heaven full of nothing but gold pieces. The Eastern Pasha will certainly get his paradise of houris. The disbeliever in afterlife will have created for himself a horrible blank abyss. We are told, then, that people remain imprisoned in their self-constructed paradises until they become so weary of the limitations of their own desires that they are gradually freed from them, and the mind is able to expand and aspire to fresh ideals. Eventually the ego is free to pass through these lower astral realms, known as purgatory, 100 birth, sleep and death purged finally of petty wishes and conceptions, and enjoy the higher states of paradise to which it has learned to orient itself. We have heard of the third heaven and the seventh heaven, without probably giving a second thought to those terms. There are apparently vistas of amazing worlds ahead of us which only open up to our understanding in measure as we develop our minds and our aspiration to meet them. We must realize that life on the physical plane is but a fraction of the whole, and that the sage or yogi of both East and West is endeavoring to train his mind to a state of continued unbroken consciousness throughout waking, sleeping, death, and onwards to the next incarnation upon this earth. In this way does a man finally become a god. 101 Secrets of breathing ___________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________:_:_ Continuing our study of the phenomena of life, we can next consider the universal activity of breathing. This very strange process is indeed much more widespread than we would at first suppose. We are told that the creation of the world was begun when the Creator breathed upon the waters. And again, the symbolical explanation of the creation of man tells how he was formed out of dust, into which was breathed the breath of life. The tremendous importance of breath could hardly have been more definitely emphasized, but we have paid little attention to the invaluable hints bequeathed to us by those ancient savants in their veiled language. We know that plants breathe, and lately have discovered that metal breathe also. Scientists are busy studying the long drawn-out rhythms of the sun. If we apply to the mystics on this point, they tell us that the sun breathes regularly, each breath taking 11 years, and causing at its fullness the appearance of sunspots upon its surface. The sun is called the heart of the solar system. We may suspect that it really is the heart of a very vast living being in whose breath we have our own breathing and living. We are familiar with the main chemical aspects of the act of breathing as applied to ourselves. Primarily, we must contain a definite amount of air, to counteract the law of gravitation which pulls us to the earth. At sea level the pressure is about 16 pounds to the square inch, and this must be equalized by the intake of air. That is why the lungs never empty all the air they contain. Their total capacity is said to be 250 cubic inches, 102 secrets of breathing, but they only empty 150, so that there always remains 100 cubic inches of air within them. For this reason, if it is desired to clean and refresh the lungs, very prolonged outward breathing is the most efficacious. Nature's way of refreshing us is to cause us to collapse limply into a chair and sigh out a long breath. In breathing we absorb the oxygen from the air into our lungs to be used for the production of heat and energy through combustion with the substances contained in our food, and we exhale the, to us, poisons as carbonic acid gas. The animal breathe in the same way, but plants, on the other hand, need to breathe in the carbonic acid gas for their sustenance. Here we have one of the secrets of the give and take existing in nature and the reason why animals and plants could not live without each other. In a normal human being there are approximately 16 to 18 breaths per minute, each taking in 30 cubic inches of air. Each breath consists of inhalation, exhalation, and a pause, the whole process taking up the time of 4 heartbeats. Our artificial methods of living have gradually ruined the natural quality of our breathing, and hardly 1 person in 50 breathes as nature intended. The correct muscular action is as follows: the lungs are contained within the basket of the ribs, the whole resembling a balloon, which inflates at the intake of breath and deflates at the exhaling. There is a muscle at the base of the lungs which should contract them upwards at the inhalation, but in most people the muscle is inactive. Many breathe downwards into their abdomens, pressing down the already sagging internal organs. In correct breathing the whole chest is uplifted at the intake of the breath, and this raises up all the internal organs from their stagnant position. At the exhalation the diaphragm muscle aforementioned contracts again upwards, dragging up still farther the organs below. Correct breathing in this manner will of course exercise a continuous gentle massage and stimulation of the digestive organs. 103 The finding of the third eye, thereby ensuring perfect action of the alimentary canal and eliminating the need for pills and drugs. The second important aspect of breathing is the rate at which we breathe, the frequency, as we should say in wireless parlance. We have seen that the whole of life is built up by means of different speeds of vibration, and therefore the rate of motion of anything is the most important factor about it, determining what it is. Therefore, we cannot overestimate the significance of the speed and rhythm of our breathing. Show me how you breathe and I will tell you what manner of man you are. The yogis and Eastern sages make a very deep study of breathing and have evolved a profound science from it. By means of this science they profess to accomplish many things, such as prolonging their youth and their years of living, and attaining to various degrees of trance and clairvoyance, by means of which they gain access to knowledge. This science has been handed down from teacher to pupil for thousands of years, and is only accessible to and possible for the very few. But it is said to be a forerunner of the attainment of all humanity in the dim future. Certain it is that all who wish to obtain any degree of control of their health, characters, or circumstances, must first begin at the very foundation of their lives, their breathing. Having put in order the mechanical muscular action of breathing, the next thing to consider is the rhythm. We have now to realize that, as not only physical things but also thoughts, feelings, and various forces exist all around us by reason of their particular number or rate of vibration, so we are all the time tuning into this or that according to our own rate of vibration, which is adjusted by our breathing. We can think of ourselves as wireless receivers, and it is up to our ego or will to tune us in and decide what we shall receive. I have said that normally there are 16 to 18 breaths per minute. It is said that if the breathing is changed to about 26 light breaths per minute it will be impossible after a short time to feel pain. 104 Secrets of breathing. That is why in the heat of battle terrible wounds can be received without feeling them at all. It is also why many great feats are accomplished under the stress of excitement. The breath quickens, the blood heats up, and this drives the ego slightly out of the body, so that sensations are little felt. Extreme indulgence in alcohol has the same effect. That is why intoxicated persons seldom hurt themselves. We can do and suffer things in hot blood which we can never achieve in cold blood. There is an interesting story in the Bible in connection with this. When Amalek drew the Israelites into battle, Moses went to the top of a hill. He held up his arms, using his great hypnotic powers to prevent the enemy from working themselves up to the fighting frenzy in which they would partly leave their bodies. He prevented them from quickening their breathing, and so they had to fight in cold blood and could not prevail. Directly Moses dropped his arms from fatigue, the battle would go against the Israelites. Martial music is designed to quicken the breath and the emotions. So is the color red on flag and uniform. It is quite impossible to become excited if one breathes slowly. That is why a person in a rage is asked to stop and count 10, the breathing inevitably slows down and excitement drops. Some of the sages believe that we have a definite number of breaths allotted to us for our lives. Those who waste them and speed them up in excitability and emotionalism shorten their span. Those who become philosophers in the true sense of the word, balanced, measured and contented, will be able to live to a very ripe old age with unimpaired faculties. By quickening the breath, the body loses its powers of self-protection and exhausts and injures itself without feeling it at the time. By slowing the breathing down to 10 or 12 per minute, it will be found impossible to feel excited, irritable or nervy. This is a useful and invisible little exercise with which we can protect ourselves from those states of mind which tend to poison our systems. 105. The finding of the third eye. If the breathing is reduced to a deep slow rhythm of 10 per minute, for 5 minutes, the brain will become marvelously clear and ready for work. This can be done before taking up any study, the result lasting for some hours. Many of the conflicting vibrations and thoughts which we allow to pass haphazard through body and brain will have been cancelled out by the rhythmic powerful beat brought about by the slower breathing. If the breathing can be dropped to an even 3 per minute, all the bodily vibratory activities will become so subdued and harmonized that the more delicate psychic perceptions will be discernible, giving us what we call inspiration, instinct, or premonition, for they are the instigators of all great achievement. The above-mentioned rates of breathing can be used without danger, if practiced gradually and intelligently. But it is extremely dangerous for the average person to attempt any of the more complicated systems sometimes unwisely given out, which might lead them into a mental home or worse. Yogis can slow down the breath to 1 per minute, which allows them an intensity of concentration resulting in experiences beyond our imagination or comprehension. Finally, they are able to suspend the breathing altogether and allow themselves to be buried for weeks at a time without coming to any harm. Breathing must always be performed through the nose, quite silently, steadily, regularly and without strain. It should preferably be practiced in a quiet place and not just after eating. While breathing, the mind should be focused on the highest ideals and aspirations. Remember that we are breathing in, besides oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen, a host of subtle and powerful elements and forces. It is the mind which subconsciously directs the selection and utilization of these powers. We breathe in life, we breathe in God, according as to what we aspire. Slow, deep, gentle breathing will cure insomnia, nerves, blood pressure, fear, brain fog and bad temper. The Easterns apparently know many things about breathing with which the Western world is not yet familiar. they believe, for 106 secrets of breathing instance, that in correct breathing only one nostril is actually used at a time. This is said to be caused by tissues in each nostril which swell alternately at intervals, thus allowing full use of only one nostril. There are said to be two currents which pass up and down the spine, the one on the right side being positive and the one on the left side negative. The breathing, therefore, is performed alternately along an electrical current intrawing positive sun-ruled particles, and a magnetic current intrawing negative moon-ruled particles. It is said that by using this knowledge the temperature of the body can be regulated. Astrologically, a sign comes up on the ascendant every 2 hours, alternately a positive and negative sign, and this is connected with the breathing. It is said that Indian doctors always study the patient's breathing first of all, being in this way able to determine the condition of the magnetic and electrical areas in the body at the time. Apparently, after a meal or during the changeover both nostrils are used, so that it takes a little time to determine the exact state of affairs. An expert in these matters would, however, know the quality of his powers of achievement at any given hour, being thus able to ensure the maximum of creative output with the minimum of expended energy. Whereas all we now know is that we are either in the mood for work or not, and this results in an indifferent and uneven output. The much discussed power of levitation, in which a yogi is said to be able to conquer the laws of gravity and rise in the air, appears to have a strong connection with breathing. A simple little experiment will point this out. Let one person lie down straight and stiff on a couple of chairs. Let 4 persons stand round him, one at each shoulder and one at each knee, each one placing a finger beneath their prone comrade. All must then breathe steadily and in unison for a minute or so. 107 The finding of the third eye. Finally, after the intake of breath, raise the prone man into the air upon the tips of the fingers. He will seem to weigh nothing at all. The Egyptians and earlier races could lift mighty stones by some agency which still puzzles scientists. Were they perhaps able to overcome the laws of gravity by concentrated scientific breathing on a large scale? If 4 people can lift say 12 stone without feeling it, by breathing in unison, what could 1,000 do? It has been found in some factories that the output of work is much improved by allowing the workers to sing. After all that has been said about breathing, it will be realized at once what an enormous power for good singing could be if properly used and understood. There is no end to the benefit to be obtained by combining breathing, rhythm and sound as in singing. A person who is timid, cowardly, or shy narrows his chest and breathes feebly. Diseases such as asthma are probably the direct result of nervous breathing. If we are calm, confident and courageous, we breathe deep and slow. As an aid to attaining these qualities, we must first correct our breathing. Everyone should breathe in the divine breath of life with all his heart and sing his song of thanksgiving no less regularly than do the birds. 108 9 Secrets of color _ _ Some poet has said, color is not in the rose but in ourselves. What is color? In Chapter 2 we stated that out of the vast scale of nature's vibrations a tiny octave is registered by the optic nerves. Our physical eyes respond to these particular vibrations with a reaction which we know as color. If we had no eyes, those vibrations would still exist, but as what? Medical science has proved that different colors have definite and varied effects upon our nervous systems and that they act upon us quite independently of our eyes or minds. Their influence is particularly marked in the case of lunatics. It has been suggested that colors are really rays radiating down to this earth at their specific rates of vibration. A red rose reflects back all the color rays except red, which it absorbs. Our optic nerves react to its vibrations and we say, the rose is red. The perfect blending of the 7 color rays in the bright daylight gives us a white light. If the rays are split up by being passed through a glass prism, they are at once visible as colors. In the same way, a rainbow is produced by the minute prismatic effects of rain in the sky. If you walk round a fountain in the sun, at a certain point you will see a rainbow. The color rays are pouring down on the earth night and day. Every object and every atom responds to them, thereby announcing its own quality to those who are able to decipher the language of colors. Where do these rays come from and what are they? 109. The finding of the third eye. We have noted that the 7 major planets of our solar system are radiating their various forces outwards, so that they reach this earth at considerable strength. As there are also 7 primary color rays radiating to the earth, we may suspect a definite connection here, and suggest that colors are really an expression of the planetary rays, observable by us as they are absorbed and held by different objects. The planets are composed of minerals and chemicals. In each planet one particular metal is said by astrologists to predominate. In Mars it is iron, and in Mercury it is that metal. Just as radium radiates off minute particles of itself for hundreds of years, so do those enormous planets radiate subtle emanations of their own chemical constituents in infinitely fine form. A human being also radiates subtle emanations of everything of which he is composed. A clairvoyant, or person with extra-sensitive sight, is able to see the colors of these rays at a certain angle, and speaks of them as the person's aura. Let us name the colors in the order in which they appear in the spectrum. We take red first because it has the lowest vibration, being therefore the coarsest and most physically vitalizing. Its place on the scale is just above the heat vibrations, and it is heat-giving in itself. As the vibrations increase in speed up the scale, we come to orange, then to yellow, then green, blue, indigo and violet, the violet leading us on up into the extraordinary penetrating and rapid vibrations of the ultraviolet ray. Let us see if we can connect up any of the information which astronomers, astrologers, and scientists give us about color and the planets. Astrologers tell us that the planetary color of Mars is red, and that Mars rules or has dynamic power over iron. Now, it is iron which is responsible for our red warm blood. Without it we should have some sort of cold pale liquid in our veins. Mars is the home of the god of war, giving a martial spirit to all those born under his sign, giving quick strength and force, vitality, power, and leadership. If we suppose that the properties of this planet are to be found in its rays which filter downwards and reach this earth as the color red, then we are not surprised when we find that the effect upon 110 secrets of color patients of red-colored electric lamps is to stimulate, warm, excite and cheer, to increase the activity of the arterial blood, to counteract physical inefficiency, paralysis, and rheumatism, that red glass windows have much the same effect, and also red walls and decorations to a lesser degree. By the same token, red should be avoided by those who contain too much iron, or who are in any condition of heat or inflammation. Red-haired people, excitable lunatics, and bulls should be surrounded by the cooler colors if peace is to prevail. Proceeding with our investigations, we find that red is the chief spectroscopic color in any herbs or medicines, having a hearing and stimulating effect, such as cayenne, cloves, or musk. Finally, we can turn to the discoveries of the famous Dr. Babbitt in chromotherapy, or healing with colors. He proved that plain water hung up in the sunlight in a sealed chromo lens of red glass becomes impregnated with certain chemicals in a powerfully healing form, the chief of which is iron. Such water when swallowed has, apparently, the same effect as an iron tonic. Let us, therefore, when using or thinking of the color red, bear in mind the following attributes with which scientists or sages have connected it. It is the color of Mars, whose stone is the ruby and whose metal is iron. It is the lowest of the 7 of the color scale, and it belongs to the lowest of the 7 notes of the musical scale, which is C. When C is played, certain sensitive people see the color red, and most martial music is in the key of C. Red when predominating in herbs, colored lights, or glass, and surroundings, gives warmth, increased circulation, vitality and energy to the body, and cheerfulness, stimulation, and excitement to the spirit. The red flag has been used throughout history for incendiarism. Finally, if dark red is seen in the aura, it indicates passion and a fighting spirit. The second color in the spectrum is orange. This beautiful color is associated with the sun, and has also a warming and invigorating effect. But whereas red is stimulating to the body and 111 the finding of the third eye, the blood, orange is stimulating to the emotions. It cures those states of paralysis which are often due to emotional reaction. It should be avoided by extremely emotional types, who should acquire balance through its complementary color, blue. Its note is D in the musical scale. Melodies in that key have a strong emotional appeal. The metal belonging to the sun is gold, from which the alchemists believed they could obtain the elixir of life which rendered man immortal. Used as a medicine, gold has a very purifying effect. The third color in the spectrum is yellow. We are told that this color belongs to the planet Mercury. Mercury confers a quick intellect by stimulating the nervous system. To be quick with the nerves should be in an active condition throughout the body, so nothing can remain stagnant under the beneficial influence of this planet. Wisdom is said to be conferred by Mercury and its color yellow. Therefore Buddha always clothed his priests in yellow, which color has stood for wisdom and intellect throughout the ages. Yellow electric lamps or glass windows stimulate the nerves of the brain and the body and cure a stagnant condition of the internal organs. They should not be used for highly nervous subjects. We find that yellow predominates spectroscopically in all herbs which are purgatives or nerve stimulants, such as senna, sulfur, fig juice, tartar, phosphorus and castor oil. An extreme amount of yellow has a disastrously overstimulating effect upon the nerves, causing death, as with prussic acid and strychnine, which are very yellow. Dr. Babbitt proved that plain water, hung in the sunlight in a sealed lens of yellow glass, becomes impregnated with very nerve-animating properties such as phosphorus and sodium, and that it will have a purgative action if drunk, where possibly other drugs have failed. This lens must not be entirely filled, as it will absorb such highly expansive chemicals from the yellow rays that it would burst if full. It is interesting to learn that the water so treated goes bad in a few days. Yellow is the third of the color scale. It corresponds to the musical note of E. Its jewel is the yellow topaz, and it represents luminosity. When seen in the human aura yellow, if dark and crude, 112 secrets of color it tells of deceit, treachery, and cowardice. We have all heard of the yellow streak, but if pale, pure, and luminous it shows high wisdom and intellectuality. Our fourth color is green, standing in the center of the scale of 7. It is the meeting ground between the thermal or heating and expanding colors of red, orange, and yellow, and the electrical, contracting, cooling colors of blue, indigo and violet. Green gives stability, endurance, and quietude. We are allowed much of it to look at in nature and to partake of as nourishment. Its action is to cool the blood and animate the nerves. It belongs to the planet Saturn, whose metal is lead. Saturn rules the spleen, which makes the white corpuscles of the blood. These harmonize the building and destroying going on in the human organism. So people with the luminous green of Saturn in their auras are the harmonizers and pacifiers of the world. They stand for social stability. If the green is dark and crude, it tells that its owner, so concerned with the affairs of others, has become green with envy. Green belongs to the fourth of the musical scale F, whose melodies, usually in a minor key, sing of the melancholy always associated with Saturn. Its stone is the emerald, which bestows peace of mind. Therefore, whether through lights, colored glass, or herbs, green gives an all-round steadying and quietening influence. The green flag and lamp represent safety and speak of the guardianship of those in authority. We are told that on the planet Saturn live our guardian spirits. Now we leave the heating colors and pass upwards to the cooling, contracting ones, blue, indigo and violet. These rays have a soothing, narcotic and antispectic action. They act as sedatives to the vascular and nervous system, subdue mania and angry passions, inflammations, sunstroke, insomnia, eye strain and all irritated conditions of mind and body. Sedatives, antiseptics, and narcotics contain much of these colors. Narcotic flowers are blue and purple. Blackberries are valued for their astringent qualities. 113. The finding of the third eye blue belongs to the planet Venus, the giver of love, devotion, and harmony. Its stone is the amethyst, the super-sacred of the 7 sacred jewels. Pale blue in the aura represents devotion, while dark blue shows fanaticism. One can either be true blue or have a fit of the blues, according to one's outlook. Dr. Babbitt says that blue lenses filled with water and exposed to sunlight become impregnated with chlorine, cobalt, manganese, and other properties having soothing and antiseptic action. This water will never putrefy. It acts as a sedative and an antiseptic, and is cooling, especially to the blood. The musical note of blue is G, a favorite key for the composer of romantic music. Indigo is the 6th of the color scale. It is, like green, a meeting ground for all the colors. Its action through herbs and chemicals is intermediately between blue and violet, soothing both nerves and blood. Its planet is said to be Uranus and its stone is jet. In the aura it shows dignity and high aspirations. Violet is the 7th and last of the color octave. It represents the 7th and highest quality which man attains, noble spiritual aspiration. Therefore it has always been connected with the priestly ceremonies. Its musical note is B, in which key much sacred music is written. Its planet is Jupiter, ruling the metal tin and the jewel sapphire. In its medical action it approaches the realm of the violetry. It cools the nerves, is magnetic and antiseptic. Violet lens water keeps indefinitely, and greatly benefits the hair, eyes, and the digestion. Violet in the aura speaks of honor, spirituality, and self-esteem. Above the violet we begin a new octave of higher and more ethereal colors mostly unseen to the average human eye. The first is rose, which is the red of Mars transmuted to its higher octave, where it speaks of optimism, hope and spiritualized love. The colors continue in octaves which become more and more sublimated, luminous, pure, and pale until in the end they blend back again into the glorious white light from whence they sprang. When the character of a human being is sublimated and perfected, the 114 secrets of colors of his aura also resolve themselves into a white spiritual light. In the olden days people were able to see this. They represented it as the halo shining around the head of a saint. Colors, therefore, are of the very deepest significance to us throughout all phases of our life. They have more influence upon us than we can possibly imagine. If we can use them intelligently, they are the greatest of friends, strengthening, soothing and inspiring. Dark, drab, and dingy colors harm our spirits, morals and health. They encourage crime, inhibitions, inferiority complexes, suicide, and stunted development. They actually prevent the radiation of personal magnetism, the give and take between human beings. They inhibit optimism, inspiration, and therefore success. A glance at some of our streets with their dingy dark bricks and shrieking posters will at once show us one reason why apathy, dullness and poor health are still prevalent. Brown is the color of earth and holds us to the earth and to material thoughts. Gray is neutral and useful as a background to other colors. White reflects back all the rays and is therefore cooling and restful. Black absorbs them all and is therefore warm, although neutralized. The modern trend towards plain, pale pastel shades shows a promising awakening to a new and uplifting color sense. A color campaign intelligently launched would do much to cheer, inspire, and invigorate humanity. 115 10 Secrets of Sound _______________________ In the beginning was the Word. Thus is the importance of sound emphasized to us, although so simply and directly that it is easy to miss its significance. The universe was created by speech, the Creator did not act. He spoke. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Let us not pass over these words with a shrug, as if they were charming fairy tales designed to enthrall the naive people of old. The deepest scientific knowledge of all times was always thus veiled by symbolism and by myth, and rich is the reward of every effort at interpretation. Certain of the ancient peoples made a profound study of chemistry. The fact that they chose to give to their chemicals the names of gods and goddesses and to describe their reactions under the guise of myths and legends does not in the least detract from their actual knowledge. On the contrary, it may show how much deeper and further they penetrated into the realms of ultimate causes than men of science do today. We are told by those teachers of antiquity that the formation of this universe out of chaos was brought about by the breath and word of the Creator, by sound. Certain sounds produce differing sets of vibrations in the ether. Some of these were of such low frequency that they formed particles of what we call matter or physical substance. There could not be light, as we know it, without minute specks of matter in the ether to reflect it. We learn that later these particles of matter collided, coalesced, the force of their mutual attraction, or gravity, causing them to commence spinning. The endless arrangements thus formed produced the solar system and all that is therein. We can gain an 116 secrets of sound idea of the infinite number of these arrangements by considering the vast scale of vibrations with which we dealt in Chapter 2. The little section of oscillations on this scale, to which the ear can react, and which we know as sound, are of comparatively low frequency. They occur below the heat vibrations. A vibration of 16 per second gives the lowest note heard by the human ear, and the scale of sound runs up to nearly 40,000 vibrations per second. This speed is the highest which we can register as sound. Higher up on the scale, vibrating at about 70 million times per second, begins the vibrations which we know as heat, and to which the heat centers in our skin react. Above these come the light and color vibrations, and above those are the X-ray and the subtle vibrations of the mind. Below the sound vibrations come those of chemical substances which make up the physical world. It is said that the whole scale of vibrations is divided up into octaves of 7. Each octave is a replica of the others, only functioning at a doubled or trebled speed of vibration. Thus, merely as a simile, supposing the first note of the octave C to vibrate at 20 per second, we might find that a certain number of octaves lower down, the vibrations of the first note of an octave at say perhaps 20 per minute, would be apparent to us as, for instance, the metal iron. The first note of an octave several hundred times higher up on the scale would be apparent to us as the color red, and far higher up still, as the emotion of anger or passion. All these different expressions of one note or vibration, as well as many others in between, are ruled, controlled, or emanated from the planet Mars according to certain schools of thought, and express the good and bad qualities which are associated with that planet. By studying such theories we can realize the intimate connection between sound and all other expressions of life. Sound is low down on the scale and comes just above form. Therefore sound is the intermediary between the abstract idea and the concrete form. Sounds mold the ether into shapes, and through these shapes the corresponding power is able to play and make its impress on physical matter. 117 The finding of the third eye. The clairvoyant primitive peoples actually saw the shapes produced in the ether by sounds. They represented these shapes as the letters of their alphabet. So most words and sounds of the early languages actually controlled and represented that which they expressed. When those people called on the God Ra, they established a connection just as definitely as we do when we tune in our wireless to Paris or London. Throughout history we can learn of the deliberate and effective use of sound. Priests have always employed it, creating certain definite reactions on the people by the use of chanting and intoning. In the ancient mysteries and magical ceremonial rites, words, sounds and shapes were combined to gain certain ends. Each one of us is intensely affected by sound waves, which of course pass right through our bodies. Every object and every person has a keynote, in other words the sum of their vibrations responds to one particular note or chord of the musical scale. If a person's note or chord is sounded gently and melodiously, it has a healing and constructive influence upon him. If it is sounded loudly, harshly, and continuously, it has a correspondingly destructive influence, making that person ill and unhappy. If you can discover the note belonging to a particular wine glass and sound it loudly into the glass for a little while, you will shatter the glass to pieces. It is said that the walls of Jericho fell because of this same law, as the keynote of the wall was purposely sounded with continuous harshness by the trumpets, under the instructions of someone with a knowledge not uncommon in those days. An instrument has lately been invented called the iodophone. It contains a tightly stretched drum surface upon which a paste is spread. Sounds and words are then uttered underneath this drum. They cause beautiful shapes to form in the paste, exact replicas of trees, ferns, and flowers as they are in nature. If sand is spread on the drum instead of paste, the sounds will produce geometrical designs instead of plant forms. It is even said that ugly and obscene words will produce ugly and displeasing patterns, and the reverse. This experiment proves the creative aspect of sound and helps us to visualize the definite forms and radiation set up in the ether by our own words. 118 Secrets of Sound. The sounds with which we are surrounded in present-day city life are mostly harsh, monotonous, and unbeautiful. If the roar of the traffic were suddenly to cease as we walked down the street, we should find that we had been screaming discordantly at our companion to make ourselves heard. Our pleasures also are mostly crudely noisy. At the average cocktail party, everyone shouts at once. The hostess is disappointed if it is not so, while some of the dance music is harsh beyond words. Tube, train, and bus all add their quota to the barrage of hideous noise which we have to endure. People who are obliged to listen day after day to sounds which are a discordant offense to nature's laws will inevitably become sick or depleted, and soon be suffering from one of those innumerable nerve complaints which are the order of the day. The only way to counteract these bad effects would be by healing the damaged nerve centers with soothing harmonies or with the blessed balm of complete silence for a short period every day. If a person is able to discover his own keynote or chord and to play it over gently to himself, he will revive as if by magic. One's keynote can be ascertained by listening to some good orchestral music. When the note is played, it will send a thrill right through its owner. If a person's life is in some way inharmonious or destructive, this can be detected at once in his voice, which will often jar upon the listener's nerves, whereas one who is living in accordance with divine law will have a melodious, pleasing voice. The more advanced types of people have resonant voices, while primitive types have the flat chest voices such as are heard among natives, gypsies, or the Apaches of Paris. The creative use of sound can be observed on all sides. The baby cries to promote its own growth. Until the little one has uttered its first cry, its progress is not assured. It is said that the birds set up the vibrations which promote the growth of the young leaves by their singing in the early spring. When the leaves are all full out, the bird songs cease, except at twilight and at dawn, at which times the chemical activities of the plant life change. At night, plant life breathes out carbon dioxide, although 119 the finding of the third eye. During the day it breathes out oxygen. The times of the changeover are heralded by the birds. The ancient Japanese mystics such as the Zen monks were said to be able to bring the dead or dying back to life by uttering a certain loud cry. An interesting description of this can be found in the novel The Garden of Vision. Some people assert that in order to connect ourselves with power and wisdom we should go apart to a quiet place and call our own Christian name over and over very gently. Uttering a noun or name creates a form in the ether which acts as a receiving station to certain powers which then play through it. Tennyson declared that he could leave his own body consciously, and gain much experience, by calling his own name. He describes this in The Ancient Sage. The potent action of sound has always been recognized and applied throughout history, but at the present time a stringent tackling of the sound problem is urgently needed. An anti-noise campaign is actually in existence, but its efforts are not much in evidence as yet, and have not received the wholehearted public support which they deserve. The medical profession is experimenting with the healing properties of sound. But it is up to every individual to take a personal interest in this vital problem and all the infinite possibilities connected with it. Those who really wish to get the best out of life should shun inharmonious noises and all superfluous chatter. They should feed their spirit and nerves with music. They should sing often, aiming more at rhythm and resonance than at loudness and high notes. They should study the tones of their own speaking voices to gain an insight into their own characters. They should watch and guard their own words, remembering that in speaking they are building definite forms for good or for evil, which will persist in the ether, connecting their owner permanently with good or evil influences, and attracting to him much that he may ignorantly consider he has not deserved. Lastly, they should remember that, as all the sages and wise ones are aware, the greatest inspiration and wisdom has been bestowed upon humanity during periods of profound and complete silence. 12011 The science of numbers ________________________ The world is built up of thousands of differing rates of vibrations, all these having their origin in the one original vibration of the mind of the Creator, or the sum, essence, or single number of the whole. We learn from the ancient teachings that the one original mighty creative power, wishing to make further manifestation, and to exercise his creative ability for a purpose which it is beyond us to understand at present, divided himself, by the power of the Word, into three, thus forming that great triangle which originated life and action as we know it. The triangle, known as Father Mother Son, or positive and negative combustion, or mercury sulfur salt, as we have seen, has always been studied all over the world. We begin, therefore, in this science, with the number 1, the Creator, who divides into three in the act of creating. The scientist will describe this formation as polarity. As Schopenhauer put it, polarity, or the sundering of a force into two quantitatively different and opposed activities, striving reunion, is a fundamental type of almost all the phenomena of nature, from the magnet and the crystal to man himself. The Hindus describe it thus: Brahma, that the world might be born, fell asunder into man and woman, became name and form, time and space. In a further definition of the origin of the solar system, we are told that the Creator, a great white light, divided into three, red, yellow and blue, the primary colors which correspond with the primary notes of the scale, C, E, and G. After the division into three, the second great division into seven took place, and the seven spirits 121, the finding of the third eye before the throne, inhabiting the seven sacred planets of the solar system, came into being. From them radiated the seven colors of the spectrum. There are also the seven notes of music, the seven planes of matter, 7 days of the week, the 7 ages of man and his 7 glands. In fact, as we have seen, the tremendous scale of nature's vibrations runs in an infinity of octaves of 7. In history we can trace man's appreciation of the significance of the number 7 when we think of the 7 days of creation, 7 cardinal virtues, 7 deadly sins, 7 wonders of the world, 7 towers of Constantinople, 7 hills of Rome, 7 plagues of Egypt, the 7-branched candlestick, and even the 7-league boots. 7, therefore, is the number of the condition of man's physical existence upon the earth as it is at present. But humanity is imperfect, unfinished, unevolved, so 7 is not the final number. Mankind, as well as all of nature, is to rise out of the imperfect state, to become complete and creative, and to develop the full quota of qualities and capacities, which run up to the finished number of 12. To this end man has to evolve under the discipline of the 12 signs of the zodiac as described in chapter 5. These signs circle round the sun and represent the 12 great lessons and qualities of living. We therefore find this number 12 playing a significant part in nature also, as well as in mythology and history. We can at once call to mind such divisions as the 12 hours of the day and the 12 months of the year. There were also the 12 sons of Jacob, symbolizing the climax of a past period, and the 12 apostles, representing the climax of the present era. When humanity has taken its degree in the school of earthly life, and graduated through all the 12 great tests, becoming thereby master of itself and all conditions, and therefore creative, it turns back to the Father as in the tale of the prodigal son. It has exhausted the possibilities of matter, has realized the illusion of the infinite divisions of nature, and retraces its steps back to the one original great 122, the science of numbers, white light of omniscience. Man has become one in understanding with the Creator. The farther we go back in history, the more profound seems the understanding of these definitions of life. The ancients arrived at a deep knowledge of astronomy, astrology, and world history without apparently possessing any of our instruments of science. We are told that they obtained this knowledge through the subtler senses, by meditation. They discovered many things about the formation, quality, and meaning of the universe which could not be expressed in words but only in numbers and symbols, and many of the vital truths of life are still only to be found in this way. Numbers and symbols play a very large part in all the Bibles and sacred writings of the ancients. We should gain much by being able to decipher them. Everyone who was allowed to study the mysteries with the learned priesthood of Egypt and Chaldea was initiated into the meanings of numbers and symbols. It is said that first Moses and then Jesus studied in this way. Pythagoras studied thus with the priests for 25 years in Memphis, Thebes, and Babylon and, as a result, founded his famous school of philosophy. He called his pupils mathematicians. He said God geometrizes. He studied the numerical relationships of all the phenomena of the universe and was able finally to classify and sum them up. Numbers rule nature, not only in the classification of objects but in periods of time. The moon plays a large part in this, moving in periods of 4 weeks, or 4 sevens, ruling woman also in these cycles, and governing the tides and seasons, fertility, and growth. The moon passes through one of the zodiacal signs every 2 hours. The earth herself, moving on a grander scale, passes through one of the great zodiacal signs about every 2,500 years. Certain influences are therefore radiated down to earth by the moon in miniature changing every 2 hours, and by the sun in magnitude changing about every 2,500 years. The scientists or astrologer who can decipher the lesser influence can be sure of the greater one. It was in this way that the ancient peoples were able to prophesy the trend of civilizations and races 2,000 or 200,000 years ahead. Much 123. The finding of the third eye of this knowledge is wrapped up in the mistranslated symbolism of the revelations. It is therefore apparent that one way of learning many of the secret processes at work in the universe and in our own natures lies in the understanding of numbers and symbols. To do this we must study the output of those early peoples and understand the foundation and origin of their knowledge, and the way in which they were able to tap the universal mind. If a doctor, knowing the periods of crisis and the duration of a certain disease, were to tell a company of the microbes just what would happen to them in 3 days' time, that would seem an impossible and wonderful feat of prophecy to the microbes, and as they only live from a few minutes to a few hours, the prophecy would apply to their far distant descendants in the dim future. If, however, the microbes could train their mentalities, and science has now proved that even a cell or a microbe has a mentality, they could obtain telepathic contact with the mind of the doctor, and themselves discover his ideas and knowledge of their future development. Mankind may be said to bear an analogous position to the microbes. We are little more than microbes upon the body of a great being, which body we call the earth. Just as we depend for our future health, comfort, peace, and the development even of our wisdom upon the well-being and cooperation of the cells in our body, so, we may imagine, does that being depend upon us for his own progress, and in helping ourselves we help him. If we make progress, he is possibly just as grateful to us as we are to our own hands, eyes, or brain as they improve in their capacity to serve us well. Having visualized man as a microbe upon the living body of the earth, let us go further. The sun is called the heart of the universe. Why? Because, we are told, it is a great heart, the heart of a being too vast for us to conceive of, and in whose structure our earth plays the part of a gland or organ. This gigantic being is he whom some of us call God, just as we ourselves are a vast inscrutable all-knowing God to the little creatures whom we know as the cells of our own bodies. 124. The science of numbers. In all reverence we might try also to realize that the glorious being whose heart is the sun may also be worshipping and striving to reach a still mightier God even further from our power to comprehend. So life repeats, up and down the scale of size, forwards and backwards upon the scale of time, periods, and cycles. It is only by having the clue to the octaves and their numbers that we are able to link up and connect and interpret the manifold different expressions of the few fundamental qualities of evolving creation. These hidden truths constitute some of the mysteries which the initiates and adepts are able to reach, one by one, as they graduate upwards through the school of life, taking one initiation after another. In olden days certain people were carefully selected to be trained to this end in the temples, although now the road is open to all. Those early scholars realized that certain sounds linked them up with certain creative principles in nature, and that every sound and quality had its number, which was the sum total of its vibrations. The science of numbers, or numerology, has, like much of the ancient knowledge, become through disuse misunderstood and debased to the rank of superstition. It is only used now from the limited personal viewpoint, but even so it can be both interesting and helpful. It is said that before birth we are drawn to our names, birth dates, and parents by an irresistible affinity with those vibrations which compose our own characters and aspirations, and that a numerologist by studying the former is able to tell us what we are and wherein lie our potentiality, our hopes, and our hazards. Each letter and date represents a number. The right reading of these numbers will describe our character and type of life. Each number represents a planet, color, quality, and experience in either its good, bad, or negative aspect. We can map out the life according to the relation in which all its numbers are standing to each other. Those who believe in this science declare that it is extremely useful in the choosing of vocations and partnerships, and that with its help the handicap of incompatibility can be avoided. Like 125, the finding of the third eye. Everything else it must be used with moderation and common sense, and not in a spirit of idle superstition. The famous American physician Dr. Abrams invented an apparatus which measures the vibrations of all the reactions of the human body. He ascertained that every disease has its own numerical value, and that the cure can also be determined by means of numbers. Much, of course, has to be learned and proved about this science, but here again the fundamental importance of a number is brought to light. The meanings of the primary numbers have been described throughout the ages as follows. The number 1 represents the first necessary qualities of evolving life, the pioneer fighting spirit, leadership, and force. A person born on the first of any month will be given chances of exercise these qualities. The number 2 represents the second stage in man's developing nature, sociability, and includes affection and all the give and take qualities, such as diplomacy and homemaking. The number 3 represents self-expression. Man has fought and made friends. Now he wants to give entertainment, beauty, and joie de vivre. People with this birth date should not be expected to be very orderly or reliable. The number 4 stands for the solid framework of life, the foundations. People attuned